Hello, everybody, and welcome to the War Room, the redo for this week's main event. Because, of course, as with our look, about half of the time it seems with War Rooms, we make the show, we edit the show, we put it up, and then one of the fighters, well, their teeth fall out, or they get a massive lump of staph on their face, or something happens. And Jamie's now just telling me that he predicted Gastelum was going to pull out. So, you know, I'm gonna have to get him to give me a heads up next time. It doesn't matter, though. We're back here. Sean Strickland stepped in, bless him. The fight's at light heavyweight, which I think is interesting. I think Sean Strickland is a real nightmare over 5 rounds, and probably more difficult for Imavov than Gastelum, but I'll get into that in a moment. So the show is brought to you by Athletic Greens today, AG1. Absolutely fantastic stuff, as you've heard me say before. This is your regular package. You'll get this. You take the top off. You take a scoop out. You drop it in your water. You shake it up and you drink it. And you've got 75 vitamins and minerals, probiotics, all kinds of good stuff in there. It's going to help improve your sleep. It's going to clear that brain fog that you get kind of early afternoon when you start to slow down a bit. It keeps you very, very switched on. It's a really fantastic supplement. Covers everything. And if you get Athletic Greens through our link, Outlawed, you'll get a year's supply of D3 and K2, which of course is very important, and you'll get a bunch of these travel sachets, which are very useful if you're on the road like I am a lot. Absolutely fantastic stuff, Athletic Greens. Make sure you check it out. So go to athleticgreens.com/outlawed. That's where you'll get your year's supply of D3 and your travel packs. Get on it. It will improve your health and your life and your mental clarity and your sleep, your microbiome, all kinds of good stuff. Okay, right. So, as you remember me talking about on the other show, Kelvin Gastelum has been 5 rounds 4 times. He's a problem for everybody. Doesn't matter whether it's a welterweight or middleweight or most light heavyweights would struggle with Kelvin Gastelum because he's smart, he's effective, he knows what he's good at and he sticks to it. He can take a shot. He's very, very tough. But over 5 rounds, he does tend to get outpointed. He's been 5 rounds 4 times. He's 0-4 over 5 rounds. Now, this is Imavov's first fight over 5 rounds. And Strickland's a real challenge. His style is far more suited to 5 rounds than it is to 3. He kind of gathers momentum like a snowball rolling downhill. The closer it gets to the bottom, the faster it's going, and the more impact it has. And this is evident in all of Strickland's fights. And I don't really think it's intentional. I just think it's kind of the style that has been crafted from walking into the gym and doing 5, 6, 7, 8 fives of sparring with random partners, because it's quite a cautious style. It's quite I wouldn't necessarily say it's a safe style, but he doesn't really step outside of himself too much. Very rarely does he kick. He doesn't really extend himself a great deal when it comes to wrestling. He tends to catch kicks and put people on the ground in that way, as opposed to really trying to wrestle them hard. I mean, we saw him close Uriah Hall down up against the fence, and I do think that's a possibility in this fight against Imavov. But at the same time, you know, he's very conscious about his energy expenditure, which is why in those last couple of rounds of a 5-round fight, he's usually the one that's pushing forward, landing bigger shots. Now, coincidentally, he's done 5 rounds 4 times, just like Kelvin Gastelum, but his record over 5 rounds is 3-1, and that one loss is that last fight against Cannonier, which was a split decision. And just before we move on from that, I was looking at the scorecards earlier today because, as you'll remember, it was a very close fight, and I think it's a good talking point generally. I won't get into it deeply in this War Room now, but we will discuss it on a live stream at some point, because two of the most active judges in Nevada State, Derek Cleary and Sal D'Amato. If you listen to the UFC with the sound on, you'll know those 2 names because they're Octagon side most weeks. Derek Cleary, Sal D'Amato. Now, in no way am I criticising these guys judging, but I think it's interesting that they both saw the fight entirely opposite. So Sal D'Amato had it 49-46 to Strickland, and Derek Cleary had it 49-46 to Cannonier. Not only did they have the exact opposite scores, but they scored every round opposite to one another, which I think is fascinating because it shows you how loose the handle of the scoring criteria is. If two of the most active judges in the US are, well, in the world, I mean, they're there all the time. If they watch a 5-round fight with two athletes that are, very competitive with one another, and they see the fight entirely differently, I want to know why. I want to know how Sal D'Amato scored the fight for Sean Strickland for 4 rounds and how Derek Cleary scored it to Cannonier. And if I'm Sean Strickland, I want to know. And I'm sure Sean doesn't care. He might not even have noticed, but I would want to know because there's something about the way that he fights which is very, very confusing for judges to score. Some judges think he's very, very effective, and other judges feel like he's sometimes getting hit and outpointed and not having as much success. So that's something just as an interesting talking point for the future. Two judges scored the fight exactly opposite, round by round. So you kind of wonder, Sean Strickland, he's normally good over 5 rounds. I would imagine after the fight against Cannonier, he looked back on the fight and he thought to himself, I could have done more. His corner team were telling him to do more. He wasn't particularly listening to them. He's an odd dude, Sean Strickland. I struggle to really enjoy his fights, if I'm honest. But with every single person that steps in there to compete, especially if they're winning, if they're doing something that's leading to success, I have to find what that is. It's important to me to figure out how they are as successful as they are. And the thing with Sean Strickland is because he doesn't spend a lot of time crafting his skills, he's not doing rounds and rounds of pads to make sure that he's throwing his techniques correctly. What he's doing is he's showing up and he's putting MMA gloves on and sticking a mouth guard on and sparring with whoever's there, which makes him like he stands at short range and he kind of peppers and picks at people. And another thing I've noticed, and this is a weird observation, but this is kind of the way my brain works. If you see someone that's got really good pressing ability, like incline pressing, shoulder strength, they tend to be very, very kind of like rounded across the front top side of their chest, much like a lot of people are across their back. And if you look at the way that Sean Strickland's chest and shoulders are built, you can tell that he can punch from any angle and, generate enough force from the muscle mass that he's got to not really have to worry about getting everything correct technique-wise. I mean, he's not a massive puncher. When you watch the fights where he's knocked somebody out, it's because he's hit them 40 or 50 times cleanly already and they're starting to fatigue. We have to go back a little bit to find TKOs on Sean Strickland's record. But, I think back to like Nordine Taleb or Brendan Allen. That was an accumulation of shots. And he's able to keep a pace on people where they start to break and wear down. Now, of course, that starts to run out a little bit as you start to approach the tops of the division. But he's done the same thing to Jack Hermansson. He did the same thing to Uriah Hall. He's just almost did the same thing to Jared Cannonier. I mean, according to one of the judges, he did it really well. So you've got to wonder how Imavov is going to deal with Sean Strickland with the kind of style that he has, the way that he fights, the pace that he can keep. The other thing we have to consider as well is that this is at 205. Now, Imavov has obviously been preparing for a middleweight fight against Kelvin Gastelum. Sean Strickland fought just before Christmas. But I would imagine he took some time off over Christmas. I would imagine he did a bit of eating. I would imagine he's gained a bit of weight. I would imagine that he doesn't want to get all the way down to 185. So it would have been Sean Strickland that said, yes, I'll take the fight, but we'll do it at 205. So I'm expecting there to be a little bit more meat on the bone for Sean Strickland. But that doesn't necessarily mean that he's going to be any less dangerous. I don't, unless his conditioning's gotten really bad in a very short space of time and he's gained a massive amount of weight, which I don't think he will have done. Strickland is going to be problematic for 25 minutes, even if he wasn't in training camp. There are a few people like Sean Strickland that I've met in my time. Michael Bisping is another one. He can be there at 95 kilos or 105 kilos, and his conditioning is the same. The only difference is that he's bigger and stronger and he hits harder. Now, coincidentally, the last time that Sean Strickland fought at a catch weight was against Brendan Allen. That was also the last time he stopped somebody. So I'm actually leaning towards the idea that Sean Strickland being a little bit heavier than normal, not having to cut to 185, he's going to hit harder and he's going to be more difficult to move around. And I don't think it's going to affect his conditioning, because Bisping was the same. He's that same kind of guy. They also kind of shaved their chest half of the time as well, which is another weird coincidence. But the conditioning doesn't seem to be altered. It's amazing. Like, I remember Bisping showing up sometimes like 110 kilos, and he just never ever slows down. His resting heart rate's incredibly low. I would imagine Sean Strickland's heart rate's incredibly low. So problematic over 25 minutes, even at short notice. I have no doubt at all that he's going to be. I went straight past tail of the tape to get into Sean Strickland taking it on short notice. So a 2-inch height advantage for Imavov and a 1-inch reach advantage for Sean Strickland. Massive experience difference for Strickland. So we've got 12-3 on Imavov's record, 5 knockouts, 4 submissions, 2 rear naked chokes to Darcy Nikimura. Sean Strickland, 25 wins and 5 losses, 10 knockouts, 4 submissions, all rear naked chokes. His last rear naked choke was his UFC debut, like 2014 against Bubba McDaniels. It's a circumstance of people getting worn down and turning away from him. It is part of the reason why he's got 4 rear naked chokes on his record. Like, the people that would crack under that kind of pressure and turn away and give their back as you're on your way up to the UFC, stand and fight when you get to the UFC. That tends to be what I see when it comes to rear naked chokes. If you've got someone that's a high pressure style, they tend to have guillotines and rear naked chokes on their record as kind of an after fact. Like, I've said this before, I've got 1 guillotine on my record. It's because I'd hit him so many times that, it became available to me. I didn't even really want the guillotine. I wasn't even thinking about winning by submission at the time. Sean Strickland is probably not going into this fight thinking about subbing Imavov. But if he sees Imavov struggling and scrambling or tired and turning his back, then we do know there is a rear naked choke there as an option. As I said, Strickland doesn't wrestle too much. I wouldn't be surprised if he clinches Imavov up against the fence, like we did see Phil Hawes do that to Imavov, slowed him down quite a lot, made him very frustrated, won the fight, of course, for Phil Hawes. But Nordine has also got, Nordine Taleb, I'm getting them mixed up, but Nasruddin has got very good elbows and knees, which is something that I don't feel like anybody's really tested Sean Strickland with. Like, if you watch, let's have a look at, let's think of two different fights for Sean Strickland. So we've got Uriah Hall, who's very quick, very good kicking. Sean Strickland was moving, walking him down, closing him down to get into that kicking range, get through that kicking range and get into the punching range where Strickland can start wearing him down. Punching range to grappling range, which was his game plan for Uriah Hall. Against Jared Cannonier, who's physically very powerful at close range and has got heavy hands, Strickland was backing up and allowing Jared Cannonier to move to him and then peppering him with shots as he was coming in. Now, both of these guys also struggle with low kicks. So the one that takes the initiative in the first round and does the early damage will, of course, take that advantage. But neither of them deal with kicks very well. Strickland doesn't really kick very much. You get a few kicks up the centre line. So I would imagine Imavov is going to take that advantage in the first round and maybe start working the body and the legs. But just generally a very interesting fight all around. Strickland, he's been stopped a couple of times. He's never been subbed. What else? Oh, yeah, the other thing as well, which was interesting, which is kind of works in Imavov's favour. Strickland's last fight against Cannonier, you could tell that he was listening to Cannonier's corner team, because every time he was circling towards his right, Cannonier would switch to southpaw and start kicking him with a power left kick. And there were moments in the fight, I think maybe second round, whereas he moves in that direction, you hear the corner team say he's moving onto it and he steps back the opposite way and stops for a second, then moves back and he gets hit with the kick. After that point, it was like it reassured him that that's what they were coaching him to do. So then it became a lot more difficult for him to land the body kick on Strickland. This is the thing, he's like, because he does so much sparring, because he's not really listening to his corner team. Generally he doesn't really pay that much attention to them. Like standing up in the corner, out of his corner, looking at his opponent. I would imagine he's far more tuned into his opponent and his corner team than he is his own, which is unusual. Most fighters, they feel like their safety net is in their corner. They kind of cling on to that a little bit, and they, sometimes if they can't hear their corner team, it makes them panic a little bit. I have noticed that in some fighters. Strickland's the opposite way. He's so enjoying the moment that he's also listening to the corner team as well. That takes a presence that a lot of fighters don't have. The downside, obviously, for Strickland is that in Imovov's corner, they're going to be speaking mostly French and maybe a little bit of Russian. And I don't get the impression that Sean Strickland took any time to learn French. So that's one advantage, that he's going to be out of his corner, because Imavov, again, it's at the apex. It's going to be quieter in there. Imavov might have the advantage of being able to hear the corner team of Strickland, especially if Strickland's not doing as he's told and his corner team are yelling at him to do something, because, that's much easier to pick up on. Oh, I feel like my brain's going 100 miles an hour. I've also got about 45,000 hours of research for Moreno Figueiredo, which I'm recording the breakdown show for tomorrow. So that is coming up. But it's this fight is fascinating. As soon as it was remade, I was like, I've got to have a look at this. Okay, I feel like I've talked quite a lot about Sean Strickland. So if I'm Imavov, I'm expecting to be able to have the advantage, especially in the first 2 rounds. I feel like he's got better movement. I feel like he controls the in and out range much better. I do feel like that runs out, though, and that's where my question comes when this is 5 rounds. I feel like this would be a much better fight for Imavov against Strickland if it was 3 rounds, because there's less time to get tired in the 4th and 5th and for Strickland to really start to apply his game. In those first couple of rounds, I think Nassourdine, especially if he incorporates low kicks, then he's going to be able to work that in and out range where he's picking at Strickland and not necessarily allowing Strickland to just kind of walk him down and start hitting him. But if at any point that does start to slow down or he starts to become a bit stagnant, that's when Strickland is going to start to push him back up against the fence. That's when I feel like Strickland might start to clinch him, maybe body lock him, try and trip him and stuff. Like, Strickland's stats are actually quite good when it comes to takedowns, takedown accuracy. 1.09 takedowns per 15 minutes, 62% accuracy, 85% takedown defense. So he's got slightly higher stats for takedowns as well as accuracy and defense, but then submissions go to Imavov's side. And that is one other thing to consider. I don't expect Strickland to be lazy and break his posture and drop his head into a position, but we did see Imavov chasing guillotines quite a bit. I mean, he was very close against Shabazian, and of course, he ended up in a top position where he could do damage with elbows as well. I think Imavov does have good wrestling. I just feel like he could be made to be tired much quicker if Strickland forces him to wrestle or clinch. So the movement and the stinging, the work in the range, not being as hittable as some of the fighters have been for Strickland, and taking a page out of Alex Pereira's book, we've talked about this before. Strickland's very fly swatting with his hands. It's very, very risky if you've got someone who's very smart and can place a foot or a hand at the side of your head. And from what I've seen of Imavov, I do expect him to have those skills. Working the body is another thing as well. This was something that they picked up on in Cannonier's corner. Working the body brings his hands down. He tends to. It's a very difficult style for me to appreciate. But there is a lot of good things about Sean Strickland's game, and a lot of things that can be very problematic if you get into the championship rounds. Oh. Might be a bit of a shock to the system for Imavov if he's got Sean Strickland still punching him in the face at the start of the 4th round. That is nightmares, especially if it's a Christmas turkey Strickland. He's going to be a bit more filled out, have a bit more power behind his punches. Yeah, good fight. I'm excited for this one. I hope that Kelvin Gastelum gets his teeth sorted and his staff fixed, and that we get this fight, because I am a fan of Gastelum as well, but Strickland Imavov, it's going to be a scrap. All right, enjoy the fights. Check out AG1, and I'll see you next time.